You're Ben Solomon. You are my coaching colleague. We train together. You're a business coach. You're based in Angers, but you work in Paris as well. You're a practitioner of action learning, which is perhaps my particular interest in you today. But also you're the Deputy General Secretary of the France chapter of the International Coach Federation. Thank you for coming and being interviewed.
This is all fun, Ben. I've always enjoyed working with you. We've coached together, we've trained together, we've had drinks together, and it's always a pleasure.
Tell me about action learning.
So action learning is a method, a process for solving urgent and complex problems. There are two words in action learning, action and learning. The action part refers to what is urgent, that is solving a complex and urgent problem.
Okay.
And the learning refers to the individual, the group, or the organizational learning that takes place while you are problem solving.
Yes.
So let me speak just a little bit about the what it looks like. Action learning, there are 6 elements to action learning. You need a problem that is urgent and complex and real to solve. You need a group of people that come together, ideally between 4 and 8, and really 6 would be perfect, to work together to try to come up with breakthrough ideas for the problem solving. Ideally, these people are a diverse group. So it could be diverse in age, it could be diverse in gender, it could be diverse in position within a company, and diverse also maybe getting people who don't necessarily work in the same company together. Why diversity? Diversity brings creativity, it brings fresh ideas, it brings naive questions sometimes, and those naive questions bring a different type of reflection.
Yeah.
Third point is questions. This is a method, a process that works exclusively through questions and answers. So people don't come and brainstorm and give their opinion, and it's not a confrontation of ideas. It is a group of people that get together to ask each other questions and respond to those questions. And everybody in the group can respond, can have a turn responding to the question. And anybody in the group can ask anybody else a question. You can even ask the group a question. Questions bring creativity. Questions bring a spirit of openness and respect for the others. So the fourth point is a commitment to taking action. The problem group gets together for 90 minutes, and at the end of the 90 minutes, people are committed to action. So it's not just there to talk, and it's to find breakthrough ideas and to test them and to take action, testing to see if these ideas and solutions will work. The fifth element is a commitment to learning. So everybody is there to learn about themselves, about how a group functions, perhaps even about how their place within the organization. Each member of the action learning group, or set as it's called, selects a leadership or communication skill to work on during the session. And at the end of the session, the person gets feedback from his or her colleagues about how they did on their leadership and communication skill they were working on. So that's one aspect.
Okay. Is this stated explicitly? Do people come in and say, today I'm going to be working on listening?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
okay.
The sixth element is there's a action learning coach, and the action learning coach is there to be the timekeeper, to make sure the rules are respected, and to bring out opportunities to learn. One way the coach does that is to manage this leadership and communication skill commitment during the session. And so the coach asks everybody to select something. So it's organized. It's part of the,
okay.
of the process. Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about the history of action learning? Where does it come from?
Sure. So action learning was invented by Reg Revans, an Englishman who I believe he was an Oxford graduate, but I'm not sure. I don't remember. In the 1930s, and he was I think he was like a physicist, or he realized that it was important to ask questions, and that it was only through asking questions that you could really get breakthrough ideas. And he worked that way with his colleagues, creating small groups that would come together and ask questions. He didn't develop the formal action learning process, but he had this notion that asking questions in a group was important, and it was vital to learning. And he worked with the Cole board, I believe, and with their managers, and he got them to come together and ask questions. And there were some good results in terms of what he was able to get them to achieve or help them to achieve.
I think that there was a 30% increase in productivity.
That's it. It was something like that, yeah.
Which is enormous.
Yeah.
So this first concept came from the 1930s. How has it modernized?
So there have been other practitioners of action learning, and I don't know too much about what happened between the 1930s and 40s with Reg Revans and what became the formal process developed by Michael McCourt in the United States, in DC, where he developed the World Institute of Action Learning, or he created it, I believe, and he formalized the process of action learning by adding also the role of the action learning coach.
Right.
So I know that there were many players between these two who contributed to action learning, and unfortunately, I don't know who they were. I think one name that I've seen is Pedler, but from my training, which was done in France with a French action learning, a master action learning coach, he pointed us in the direction of Michael McCourt in the United States.
And how much is this used today in the world or in France?
So in the world, it has been being used for over 20 years in corporations like Microsoft, Novartis, for example. There are many others. It's gained a lot of traction in Asia.
Okay.
It's used in the Netherlands. It's used in the United States. And it is beginning to be used in France.
Is it generally by much bigger corporations, or are there smaller groups that are toying with this that you know of?
The examples that I read about are major corporations. The examples of where I've used it have all been small businesses or smaller businesses.
Can I open a parenthesis to just come back to a conversation that we were having? It was my absolutely unqualified statistic that 80% of teams have a lower IQ than the average of the consistent members of the team. It's probably not that factual. But I've read elsewhere that the majority of teams are as effective as the person that dominates the team. And people tend to follow the leader. And so if somebody says, I think this, everyone's like, oh, yeah, that'll be the easiest solution. And it's not bringing out the diverse knowledge of the teams. And you were talking about the value of diversity. And we've seen in lots of situations where people are coming into positions of power, perhaps like a presidency in the United States, saying like, okay, I'm going to bring in a specialist in medicine. I'm going to bring in a specialist in international negotiations. And you bring in these specialists. But if one person dominates that, we don't really reap the benefit of those specialists. And in fact, there is only a very small number of teams that manage to be more effective than the component parts that make them up.
Yeah.
You began to tell me a story about the French Olympic sprinting relay team.
Yeah, I mean, it's something to that extent, Ben. I think it was the Olympic team. I don't remember the year, but I believe that this French, the men's Olympic relay team that was not favored to win, beat the favorites, which I believe that year were the Americans. And what was interesting to see was that if you looked at individual times, I believe 3 of the 4 Americans had better times than 3 of the 4 French people individually. But when they worked together as a team, it was the French team that beat the Americans. So this was just it was an anecdote to perhaps suggest that sometimes 1 + 1 = 3.
How did they do it?
That's a great question. How did they do it?
This is in the exchange of the baton, I guess.
Yeah.
Not needing to slow down as they exchange the baton.
Yeah, I guess a culture in which everybody was free to express themselves as they were, and maybe that gave them extra power, extra speed that day.
There are so many reasons to love this story. It connects with my interest in action learning, which is, I suppose, what's called collective intelligence. Tell me just a bit about collective intelligence.
Sure. So action learning is a process or a method within the family of collective intelligence. There are many methods, processes, tools used with collective intelligence. A major one in France that is used is co-développement.
Yes.
And action learning just happens to be another one. And it has its similarities with co-développement, but it's not quite the same. And premise, or the major idea, is that we are stronger as a group. The ideas that a group can bring outweigh what one can imagine him or herself.
I mean, but I think this comes back to my invented statistic that maybe that just isn't always the case. But the fact is that we could be stronger. We have this potential if we get smart about how we manage our interactions. Do you apply learnings from action learning into other parts of your life when you're not being an action learning coach?
Yeah, I think about diversity. I think about naive questions. I know. Sometimes I think about Michael McCourt, who in one of his presentations said, "I love questions, and there are many parents that get frustrated with their kids or their grandchildren who ask questions and questions and questions." And he said, "I take them all. I love questions." And so I have that in the back of my mind when I hear questions, when I hear people asking me questions. I think about that, and I think about the value of not only somebody asking, but actually answering the question.
Yeah. One thing that we learned about through coaching is that part of the objective in a coaching session is to ask people questions they don't know the answer to, so that they can learn something new as they're answering the question. And as somebody who's spent a lot of my life thinking, for a long time, I thought I had the answers to all the questions. And this moment of discovering when training to become a coach, that questions that I didn't know the answers to were the best. These were the ones which created disruption, which taught me new things, which helped me get over barriers and hurdles to achieving the things that I wanted to achieve. I don't know if you've got an anecdote of something where, where a child asks a question and the adult goes like, okay, right, let's invent the computer or something.
There's sort of a well-known story that a major corporation was struggling with a problem, a complex, urgent, and real problem, and they were working late at night, and they decided to order pizza, and somebody in the set decided to invite the pizza delivery guy to participate in the session, and apparently this person had some really brilliant, naive questions that allowed the group to reflect more deeply and get a new angle on the problem. And this reminds me that when you get a group of experts together, you don't necessarily have better results, or maybe you have weaker results than when you get a group of diverse people together when both groups are trying to problem solve, which I thought was very interesting. That you don't need a group of experts to find breakthrough solutions and new ideas to urgent and complex problems. The experts clearly are needed when there is one solution possible, and those experts can help you find what the one and only solution is for this problem. So if you're looking for the temperature at which you need to heat a certain substance, well, certainly an expert can help you find that. However, as you said, if you're trying to answer a question for which the answer is unknown, a group of diverse people do better.
Could you bring a small child into an action learning group? A 4-year-old. Be like, what does that mean? I mean, how naive can you get with questions?
That's a great question. I've never experimented in an action learning set with a child. Yeah, something's telling me that you need a little bit of maturity, just a teeny bit of maturity to participate. But I don't know. I've never tried. Why not?
Tell me just about the structure of a session. What actually is happening that maybe we can steal some ideas from and use in our everyday lives, or use with our friends or with our companies or with our families? Could you describe the process?
Sure. So an action learning session lasts typically 90 minutes. There are 4 stages to the session. The first stage is the problem presenter presents the problem to the group in 3 minutes in a very clear and concise fashion.
How important is the timing?
The timing's very important.
Can I ask why?
Because the group would like time to ask questions. And so the idea is to answer the questions, but to ask many questions. Let me get into the second stage. So after stage 1, which is problem presentation, the other members of the group are just listening. The second stage is about 12 minutes long, and it's a crucial stage because through questions, the group asks the problem presenter questions to really find what is the real problem. Many times, the problem that is presented initially is the real problem. However, many times, the problem that is initially presented turns out to be not the problem. And through the questions of the group, the problem presenter is able to determine what his or her problem, urgent, complex, and real, is. And this shift is quite interesting.
Who decides whether it's a real shift? Whether this is the real problem or not the real problem?
Ultimately, it's the problem presenter.
Okay.
The problem presenter at the end of this stage is asked by the action learning coach whether he or she, based on what they've heard, wishes to recenter or shift the problem. And so what happens is, if the group thinks that the problem presenter is not presenting the real problem, then the coach can decide to extend that second phase, and the group then agrees to continue together or not.
So there is a common accord that this is a worthwhile topic for discussion.
The consensus that is made is that we are working on what is considered to be the problem.
I love this concept of shift. This is something that as a coach, I come across a lot. I think it's one of the core concepts of coaching, which is maybe, coming with an issue, something that you want. And then through questions, there's a shift in perception that the problem is reframed, that the ambition is reframed.
It is and can be used in everyday life when you bring what you perceive to be a problem to somebody or to a group. If this group is listening and asking questions, and you're open to these questions, you might make a shift. You might see a shift that is possible.
There's a famous case study of a hotel manager in San Francisco getting a lot of complaints about slow lifts. And he gets a quote for repairing the lifts to get them up to standard so they can go quicker. And it's, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And through some kind of shift, we don't know what the process is, or at least I'm not aware of what the process is. He comes to the conclusion that the best thing to do would be to fit mirrors on the external doors. The mirrors cost $4,000, thus saving hundreds of thousands of dollars, and people stop complaining. But it's a good example of a shift, of a way of looking at a problem in another way. Tell me about phase 3.
So once the clarification stage is finished, clarifying the problem, you move to stage 3, which lasts about 55 minutes. It's the longest stage. Okay. And this, again, through questions and answers, is the stage where the group is really working hard to bring breakthrough ideas and solutions for the problem. And the coach is there to be the timekeeper, to make sure that the rules are being respected, and to bring out learning opportunities. For example, the coach might observe that there are some people dominating the work, and the coach will intervene not on the subject matter, but on how the group is functioning, and will ask a question to the group. For example, I've been noticing that several people are speaking more than others. What's the impact on the group? And so the group reflects, and the group self-regulates. And you might get some people saying, well, if certain people are dominating the conversation, we don't get the input from other people, and that's a disadvantage for the group. So, okay, the coach might ask then, how can we work better as a group? And the group will then make a decision. Okay, I think it would be a good idea to take turns.
Okay. But this isn't a formal rule. This is something that the group decides amongst them how to self-regulate.
That's it. And the coach is there to make the observation and to bring out the learning. And what happens is this group, when they have a second opportunity and a third opportunity to work together, they're much more efficient. The third time they work together, they're much more efficient than the first time.
Yeah.
And this becomes a learning group.
Are there risks, or have you experienced situations where one person in the group is very dominant, for example, like the head of a company, and kind of imposes really awful rules for regulating the group, and felt powerless as a coach, or felt, that kind of frustration of like, oh, I wish they'd said like, why don't we let everyone speak? But, maybe this dominant person said like, I'm the person, I think I've got the expert knowledge here, so I will do the speaking. Or I don't know. Is there a risk of this, or does it just not happen when you put people in front of the reality that you could be getting better use of the people in the group?
Yeah. Another great question, Ben. Makes me think of a bunch of things. One is that the group doesn't just arrive one day and decide to work together. When the company agrees to do some action learning, the action learning coach has spent a little time with the problem presenter beforehand to speak about the problem and to help the problem presenter prepare that 3-minute presentation of the problem.
Right.
And before the group really works together, there is a little bit of, there might be some light training that goes on, explaining what is the spirit of action learning, what are the rules, what are the elements, what is it, what's the timing of a session, and what are the objectives. And most people get it. They just understand, and they want to, if they're there, they want to be there.
Yes.
And if the general director, the president, the main manager, the main director participates in a group, the coach will usually ask him or her to speak last, not first, so as to give the group an opportunity to participate.
Do you make a kind of agreement with that powerful person beforehand, or do you do that spontaneously and be just like, no, you wait your turn?
Yeah, there is an agreement done beforehand.
Okay.
However, in a session, people are human, things happen, and the coach is there to guarantee that the spirit of action learning is respected, and that is a spirit of what I call, and we're both familiar with this from youth theory, but open mind, open heart, open hand. And it's really we're there to listen to each other, respect each other, be open to each other, and to work together.
Having experienced this with you as the action learning coach, giving a demonstration and been in that group, you were checking in with a lot of things like, is this going in the direction that you want it to? Is it functioning in the way that you want it to? Is this useful? Are there any other check-ins that the coach will do during this 55 minutes?
Well, it depends on what's happening in the group, right? But how's the distribution of speaking among people? How creative is the group being? How pertinent are the questions? Something that is often neglected, not always, but our emotions. And so the coach might make an observation about an emotion or energy in the room, and ask the group how that impacts or doesn't impact something. Because many breakthrough solutions and ideas come from what's undercurrents that are happening, undercurrents, so not the explicit but the implicit, and the coach is there to pick up on that and to ask questions around that.
Okay. And you said before that the coach doesn't get involved in the content, that it's really the form that the coach is managing.
The form and the learning.
Yeah, okay. Is there ever a gray area where perhaps as a coach you want to ask a question like, in what ways might you be able to be more disruptive, which might be kind of just crossing the boundary from form into content? Does that happen? Can that happen? Or are the rules very strict?
It makes me think that maybe if the problem presented was about disruption, like the person said, our team or our company is not disruptive enough, or I want our company to be more disruptive, maybe the coach would intervene around that word that was already used. But in a way, I spoke about creativity, how on a scale of 1 to 10, how creative is the group being?
Yeah.
That's a question that a coach might ask, an action learning coach. And yeah, how disruptive? I guess it's a little bit leading. It sounds a little leading.
Yeah. And in these moments of interruption where you say, like, can we just pause? Can I just ask you a question? How are you perceiving the process? How's this going for you? How much do you manage the kind of round the table, everybody giving a response at that moment?
Yeah. It's required that everybody answer the question. If the question is, for example, the coach might ask, on a scale of 1 to 10, how are we doing as a group? Everybody has to give a number.
Yeah. Okay.
On the question is, what can we do to work better as a group? Those who want to give an answer, give an answer.
And it's you who decides whether the question is an imperative question for everybody or whether it can be just those who wish to contribute.
Yeah, I'd never thought about it that way, the way you just said it, as it being an imperative question. As a coach, I ask a question that I feel will bring out learning, and I give everybody an opportunity to respond, but I don't require it.
Yeah. Okay. That's nice. What happens after the 55 minutes of stage 3?
So at the end of the 55 minutes, the coach turns to the problem presenter and asks if first if the problem presenter has been helped by the group, and then to reflect for a few minutes about what are the actions that solutions that he or she would like to put in place. So we're speaking about the action plan. There are times where the problem presenter needs a little support, and so the coach may ask the group to list as a group what were the actions, what were the solutions that were elicited during the session. Can we remember as a group what emerged, and then people start to contribute. And the person, I often encourage people to have pen and paper so they can write things down during the session.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can actually have a scribe. Somebody might have a role as the scribe. Right. So actions are decided, and the coach will push a little further and ask, when is this going to happen?
So if the problem presenter says, well, I've got a lot to think about, is that acceptable as an action? Thinking?
Acceptable for who?
Yeah, I was going to ask myself the same question. I suppose for the process, to consider that the process is a success. If somebody goes away and says, okay, I'm going to think about that, and you say, when are you going to think about that? Or encouraging that to be more precise. Is there a kind of moral obligation to the team to say, okay, I'm going to do this, thanks for your time, rather than saying like, well, I'll have a think about that, which might sound a little bit like thanks for nothing.
Yeah. It's a very legitimate question. I can only share my experience, Ben, which has been in all the action learning groups. There were actions that were decided on, that the person listed the actions that he or she wanted to do.
Yeah.
And I keep saying he or she, but there are situations where there's a group that is working together as a group to decide on actions as a group. That's also a possibility.
Yeah.
And in that case, what I've done is for the actions are listed, perhaps by the scribe, and then people are given sticky dots, and I ask the group to select the actions for them that have the most energy behind them. Not what's the best action, but where's the most energy here?
Okay.
Or what are the actions that would have the most impact, maybe using the least amount of energy? I don't know. And so the group, and what happens is the sticky dots are often grouped in you can clearly see the top 3 choices or the top 5 choices.
Yeah. Okay. It's a way of visualizing consensus.
Yeah.
Without being formally counting and saying, asking people to vote.
That's it. Yeah. You don't want to. Yeah. The voting is haven't done voting. And the actions that are not selected doesn't mean that you throw them out, but maybe for the first test, for the first action period, you select the 3 or the 5 top ones.
Other stages? Stage 5? Does it exist?
Well, it does and it doesn't. In my training, there were 4 stages. I just read a book that was published by the person who Daniel Belay, who trained us, and he's speaking about 5 stages now, although there are always 4. He just merged 4 and 5, and so in the example that I'm giving you, in stage 4, you have the actions, you have the follow-up. When are you going to do this, etc.? When are you planning to do this? And then you have the feedback, and the feedback is 2 or 3-fold. That is to say that individually, people are asked how they did on their leadership and communication skill individually, and then they get feedback from the whole group with examples of where they put in place or put in practice their leadership or communication skill that they wanted to work on during the session.
Yes. Okay.
And the coach will also invite the people to reflect on what they're walking away with, how they might use what they learned today in their everyday life.
Right.
Which is something I think you're curious about yourself.
Yeah.
And then what did you learn about working in a group? About what did you learn about your company?
These are questions which I presume, I think of these as really a necessary part of any coaching process, in that by answering these questions as a coachee, it's kind of anchoring the process, just reminding, that this wasn't just 90 minutes of great experience, but it's kind of committing my brain to retaining what's going on.
Yeah, there's commitment to action, there's commitment to learning from everybody. And what works nicely is when the group has an opportunity to come together for a second, for a third, for a fourth time, because you get a group that is more and more efficient as they work together, or the ideas that were tested, the actions that were tested for the initial problem are brought back to the table and discussed, and you see what's working, what's not working, and where do you want to move forward.
So in future sessions, does the role of the coach diminish?
No, the role of the coach is always there and is always present. It's not action learning if there's no action learning coach. However, your question is legitimate in that the action learning coach that facilitates that first session is maybe not the action learning coach that will facilitate the fourth session.
So is this something that people can, learn in an informal way and learn to use this after the action learning coach has gone? And do people do this?
I know that certain companies have internal action learning coaches, or they have internal informal action learning coaches, and they switch roles,
Right. Okay.
So it's possible. Of course, you have to get a feel for it. You have to understand what your responsibilities are.
Yeah.
I'm thinking that this type of approach to problem solving can be done in an informal way with a shorter time period, and this has been. I've run action learning sessions for 30 minutes, done a demo or accelerated an accelerated session, and so it is possible to do it and to shorten the stages. Why not? It's perfectly possible.
I mean, there are other similar forms, aren't there? And things that I know of, case clinic. We talked earlier, you mentioned co-development. And these are similar structures, some of them more formal, like co-development, and World Cafe, which was a very informal one, but which nonetheless had a similar structure. As somebody presents a problem, people ask questions, and there is some interchange and there's timing involved in it. Could you give us a brief rundown of how you might do an informal 30-minute or 1 hour action learning type activity?
I'm thinking back to something that we did together, I believe, in our training, which was action learning similar. It's not action learning, but I think it was no more than 30 minutes. There was a person who had a problem that wanted that they brought to the table, and they explained it for a minute, and then for the next 15 minutes, the people who were not the problem presenter asked the problem presenter questions. The problem presenter wrote down the questions, but did not answer the question. So the person received a list of 20 targeted questions around this subject. After that, the problem presenter had a few minutes, let's say 2 or 3, to reflect on what he or she was prepared to do now or wanted to do now in terms of actions. And the group was asked to just reflect on what they learned, what they observed, what they learned, what they were interested in doing now. And then the last stage was the problem presenter presented what he or she was prepared to do. So it was a very efficient, effective, and very peaceful way of moving forward. And this is what sparked my interest in action learning, because it was called action learning what I learned later is that it wasn't exactly action learning, but it was collective intelligence. It was a form of collective intelligence with aspects of action learning, but it wasn't a formal action learning session. So this is a very informal process that could be put in place by anybody or any group.
Yeah. There are similar processes as well, I think, used in agile project management, where the agile coach will manage a meeting in this kind of way, with some kind of formal timed structures. Another structure that I'm familiar with is case clinic, where I think they say the optimal group is 6 people. What's the optimum size for a group in action learning?
6.
6. Okay. The idea with case clinic is that you do regular case clinics. So you have regular meetings between these 6 people, and each person at each meeting, each person takes the role of the coach. The role of the coach is more informal, but it's basically the coach has a list of stages to go through and is the timekeeper. And the people that are meeting are doing this through common accord, that they want to experience case clinic. And so they agree that there is a mandate for the coach. Today, you are the coach, and we will respect your coaching guidance. Obviously, the coach isn't a figure of power particularly, but my experience is that the mandate of coach is absolutely key. It's given by the people in the group. Obviously, if you were employed and you're being paid a sum of money to go in and be some kind of group coach or action learning coach, then the mandate comes fairly easily. People presume that you're going to take that role. But I think in self-organized groups, this could be a point of potential tension. Like, who are you to tell us to move on? Who are you to ask these questions or to imply that, ask us questions about whether we're doing a good job?
Yeah, well, this is what Michael McCourt brought to action learning, the mandate and the role of the coach, because it is hard for a group to do that. If you're part of a group and then suddenly you're asked to, you're not judging and you're not giving advice, but you are taking a different role and you're managing your colleagues. For me, it's if there is a high degree of psychological safety, team psychological safety in the group, that is, that people feel free to be who they are and do what they need to do and say what they need to say, without fearing retribution, without fearing consequences. And if people are open to that, then it can work. So there's a link between high team psychological safety and this type of exercise.
So what if you're with a group of friends and you're trying to organize a thing, or there's some kind of dispute or some kind of collective problem faced, and you're sitting around to get to the root of this, and you've got this knowledge of action learning and this experience, but you don't have the mandate. Are there things that you can bring to that table without the mandate of coach, without trying to take on a coaching role or a coaching position even? What could somebody do in that kind of situation?
I'm just thinking about some of the basics of coaching without being a coach, but just listening.
Yeah.
And showing the person that you're listening by, you might call it backtracking and coaching, but it might just be stating what you've understood or what you've heard, because it's always nice to hear that from somebody, you hear that they're listening to you.
Yeah.
Not judging.
Yeah.
And you can always ask, how can I help you?
Yeah. One thing that we learn through coaching is that your position and this peaceful, safe, non-judgmental position actually has influence on other people. And although it's not a guarantee of kind of controlling and making sure that everybody behaves themselves and behaves as well as your perfect coachiness, breathing slow, being calm, being polite, listening actively and attentively, and providing a safe space for the people that you're with impacts the people that you're with.
That makes sense to me.
Is there anything else that people could bring into their everyday lives, be it professional or personal situations with others?
Yeah, this is nothing new, but it's pausing before speaking and really listening to the person, and not speaking about yourself when the person is sharing a problem or a challenge, but speaking about what you're hearing rather than your own experience. If the person, if you feel that a personal experience might contribute, you may ask the person, would you be interested in hearing something that that happened to me that is a little similar to what you're saying? I can share an anecdote or an experience. But often we're quick to talk about ourselves when the person is speaking about themselves, and so let's listen and let's speak about what they're speaking about, not about what we want to speak about.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ben.
Thank you, Ben. It was fun, and you are really good. You're really good at what you do.
I don't know about that. I feel a bit embarrassed. Hey, thanks for watching. There's a lot more information, videos and articles about all kinds of things to do with coaching at coach-works.org. These videos are a lot of fun to make. They're also quite a lot of effort and really time consuming. So if ever you enjoyed it or found it useful, please leave a like or subscribe to the channel. Because apart from anything else, it helps search engines get information like this to people who are interested in it. Thank you very much. See you soon.